I don't have a proper intro today, not that I ever had one, and the only thing that I want to have today is fun, deliver you all the information you would need about this phone and give you my opinion. That's pretty much the plan for today, so I would say let's just start and talk about the design and build quality. And in case things look a little bit different, I'm using the Sony A6300 camera that I have in for review, so I didn't maybe get all the settings right, but I hope it's good enough. Let's talk about the material first, because in my first impressions video I said that the metal feels a little bit odd and attracts a lot of fingerprints, and it's actually called Alkaleido, and it's kind of specifically made for this phone not to pick up fingerprints, but as you can see here it picks up a lot of finger oil over time and therefore seems quite greasy and a little bit nasty. What I have to say though, what doesn't bother me so much is the grease itself, but the fact that it feels amazing because it's so nice and smooth and really great. In terms of grip, it's a little bit of a hit and miss like every metal. So sometimes grippy, sometimes not. But usually the overall experience, mostly due to the amazing feel, was great. On the sides we have plastic, glossy plastic, which I like personally because I find it grippy and it's nicely curved as you can see. So I definitely like that. On the top and bottom we also have once again Alkaleido. So just in terms of materials, you have to decide if you like that, but I can tell you one thing, it feels amazing. On the back we have of course the camera, laser autofocus and the LEDs and something more. We have the microphone here, headphone jack. On the left side we have the SIM card and SD card tray, but once again as on the recent phones, once you pull that out the phone will restart. Maybe not the best solution if you want to maybe more often change your SD card, but not a real problem for me. USB Type-C on the bottom, and as you can also see another microphone. Here we can see the dedicated camera shutter button, volume rocker. I actually think this one it's not even that unusually placed, so it's kind of okay. Power button and fingerprint reader, and I have to say one thing that I don't quite get is that the longer the device seems to be on standby, the weaker or the worse the recognition gets, because usually as you have seen now I've used it and if I press now it unlocks, if I press now it unlocks, but if I have it for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes on standby and then hit, this happens and then you have to press once again or longer, because then it kind of seems a little bit unreliable. This was way more reliable and way quicker for me on the Xperia X Compact, so I'm not quite sure why that is the case, because the fingerprint reader itself, as you can see here, works really fast. But I don't know why. Maybe they can tweak that with software, but it's okay. We have a notification LED. We don't have the smallest bezels, as you can already see, and they're definitely not on the bottom and chin. Okay, yes, therefore we have front-facing stereo speakers, but I've seen the solution even from Sony already a lot shorter. So the bottom and top, that's one thing. The sides are not big of an issue, but I have to still say the phone for a 5.2 incher feels almost more like a 5.5 incher and is a little bit unreal, because stretching whole over to the side is not the easiest task. In the end, it comes down to you. If you want the most compact 5.2 incher, this is not quite it. Because, for example, the Sony Xperia Z3 that I had felt a lot smaller and was also waterproof and had front-facing stereo speakers. But yeah, okay, that's it for that. In terms of display, what I have to say about that is that it's just simply one thing, gorgeous. Because the colors may be not 100% accurate. Because especially, let's quickly check the Google Plus, when we see reds here, those are super saturated in my opinion. That's what I would like to call them, because they aren't correct and they are over the top, but I wouldn't call them quite oversaturated, because I think they look amazing. I really like the colors here because they are super vibrant, super punchy, maybe not 100% accurate, and I've seen even side by side compared to an AMOLED, sometimes those seem more saturated than those, but it's in a way that I like it a lot and didn't mind it at all. So absolutely beautiful display. Viewing angles are solid, maximum brightness was solid, the white was nice, and we have still the white balance control in the settings, and the black is good with not a lot of IPS glow. So overall I absolutely think this is a flagship worthy display, even though it's maybe just 1080p, which I don't bother about at all, so I like it a lot. So let's get to the sound. I'm gonna say pretty much the same as I did already in my first impressions video. At this point, I'm satisfied enough. I still would wish for it to be louder, and yes, now a lot of people will say, but it is waterproof, because this was what upset a lot of people when I said that the ZT-Axon is so much louder. And you can compare a non-waterproof phone with a waterproof phone, but in the end, I was right. I said it's a lot louder. It doesn't really matter that this one is waterproof because that's another advantage of it, but has nothing to do with the sound because you can make a waterproof speaker louder after all. They didn't decide to do that. The quality itself is good. I think the highs are ever so slightly muffled, maybe because they can't really reflect from anything else and that's why they feel like that. But overall, like I said, good enough speaker. Could be louder, but it is good enough for me right now. Overall balance is fine, so I'm at the point where I say it's good, maybe even very good, but there is still a room for improvement and I think Sony can do better because especially something like on the Sony Xperia Z5 Compact, for some reason that was the one Sony speaker that I found to be the best one so far. I'm not quite sure why and even that, maybe because it was thicker, I don't know. About the headphone jack quality, usually something that I complain about on Sony phones that it's not loud enough, not good enough, but in this case I actually have to say it's above average and it noticeably because it's still not as loud as an HTC 10, but it is louder than a lot of the phones that I've recently used, so still not quite where I want it in terms of maximum volume because I just wanna have a lot of that and pretty much no phone can give me that. There's maybe a handful of those and this one is not that yet either, but it's actually good enough. And I sound a little bit too harsh when it comes to the sound, but that's just my hearing, even though it is very good. I got that from my doctor told. But yeah, let's not drag this too far. Let's check the performance, close all the apps and see what in terms of loading times is there to say. As you can see, apps launch very quickly. This is something that I really like on Sony phones. They react quite quick. It's not quite as fast when it comes to the switching here anymore, because as you can see here, there is quite... I have to do it a little bit slower so it can keep up. This was something that my Sony Xperia Z3 back in the days could a lot way nicer, but I guess that's due to the digitizer more so. But you won't really need this anyway, so this is not a real case scenario. But what you can see here already, and especially in the browser, you get an absolutely awesome performance because it's super smooth, like 95 or let's say 90% of all the time. Because I said this in my first impressions video that I had some occasional odd slowdowns. And they went away, but sometimes they still are back again. And this is the one thing that bothers me a little bit, because if it's 90% performing absolutely amazing, that's great to see. But those 10% where it slows down and is visible, it can get a little bit annoying. And I have to say though, I'm very, very confident they could easily just fix that with an update, because it's not a major thing, definitely not a deal breaker or anything. Just wanted it to be mentioned. Of course, since we have a lot of RAM, there is no problem here in getting this done. As you can see here, it is very responsive, it is very zippy, and this is something that I like a lot about the Sony phones. The one thing that is also visible in games is the slowdown, because games, therefore, I would just call to be good, to maybe close to very good in terms of performance, because if everything is fine, frame rates are quite stable, quite smooth, quite good, and playable all the times though, that I have to say. But these occasional slowdowns, especially in Riptide, were quite obvious, something that I'm not quite sure why the SoC can't be it alone, and the overheating is, or heating itself is not the case, because it did not really overheat. It got warm, but that's normal for every phone and that's fine. But the overall performance was still good for games. It's absolutely playable. There are better ones, and I think with optimization they can fix that as well. And that's why I want to talk about the battery now. And I have to say the same thing as I did on my last review. I have a review unit from Sony here, so the packaging might differ. And I didn't get a quick charger, and that's why you can see a charge time of 2 hours and 5 minutes for a full charge. Could be maybe better with a proper quick charger. I used my quick charge 3.0 quick charger that usually charges very fast. Maybe on Sony phones it doesn't quite work so well, but that's maybe a compatibility issue. Standby drain was good, actually sometimes quite good, and the overall battery life is absolutely more than satisfying, and I would call it very good. Not quite yet great, because over the course of one day in mixed use with a brightness of 40%, I got 5 hours and maybe even slightly more, but this is me being a little bit heavy on my devices for some reason, and therefore I would say expect at least a half hour, some people even way more, and this is definitely good. And on Wi-Fi easily 6 hours for me, and overall this is already good. I would give out the great certificate for at least 6 hours in mixed use, but 5 is totally fine for me, and I guess in many situations would be already good enough for 2 days, and that's it. So let's talk about software. And the one thing that I have to say here though is that by now it feels a little bit stale. I don't want to really call it bad or something like that, because as you can see here, it looks a lot like stock, which a lot of people like to see. I'm actually using Nova Launcher. I forgot to change that, but it doesn't really matter because their default one, as you can see here, is absolutely okay. As you can see here, this is the normal one with the app tray. As you can see here, not really much to say. It's a standard, yeah, average launcher. I don't really care about stock launchers because I never use them anyways. In terms of options though, I would like to see a few more things, especially things like rearranging the buttons, because I still get comments from people saying that they are left-handed maybe and they wish to be the button on the other side. That is just not the case here, and these are minor modifications that some other ones offer by now. Of course, we have accessory settings for headphones, something like that, and audio settings where you can adjust that. So audio and video seems to be very important for Sony, which is definitely nice to see, since we have, as you can see, the image enhancement and the white balance control. But other than that, there's not much. Usually it's pretty much just stock with no additions at all. This is something that is totally fine if you like the stock Android experience and if you don't need anything else, but a few minor adjustments wouldn't have hurt them either, especially if you keep it with a nice balance. But one thing that is good to say for Sony, they are very well known for their fast and reliable updates for a quite long period of time, so you should be safe with this one. And that's why I want to say, let's go to the camera qualities. And here I have to say, selfies look really impressive, nice and sharp, great color, the balance looks really nice. Everything has done here really well. So I definitely like what I see here. Okay, as you can see, it's not always perfect, and it could be sometimes a little bit sharper, but the overall experience, especially here indoors, is something that I've not seen yet in this kind of quality level, because it is so sharp, so detailed, with quite good colors and an exposure I have not seen yet indoors in these lighting situations. So I'm highly impressed here. This is with the flash in lower light situations, this without. But this is actually still very good. And I have to say, maybe not in all the cases, like maybe sometimes here, or especially here, it's not all that great. But I have to say, one of the better, or maybe almost best low light situations, as you can see here and also here. It picks up a lot of light and it still maintains very sharp, especially these pictures here now. This one and this one. One of amongst the very best, where it picks up a lot of light details, doesn't get grainy, and so here I'm highly pleased. Now let's talk about the other great thing, and that is the exposure in general on the main cam, because as you can see, we have quite some harsh light from the sun and a lot of clouds actually though, and it still maintains to show both sides very good. So the bright side, you still see the clouds and you see the foreground, which is something that a lot of cams don't capture, right? So I'm highly impressed here. So this is managed really good, and as you can see here, always the case. Other pictures, nice and sharp. I still prefer a little bit over sharpening, which you don't get so much on Sony cameras, and that's maybe I'm not super impressed, because I over sharpen my own videos and I over sharpen everything else. But as you can also see on very close-up macros, the autofocus didn't work so well. So you sometimes need get a little bit farther away. As you can see here though, this is a super impressive picture. If we get close, as you can see, it still maintains a lot of details, which is super nice to see. And here, very accurate colors. And I have to say, I had quite bad weather, so keep that in mind. If it would have been better weather, I would have really liked to have seen what could have happened there. But it was raining for the last 2 weeks, so I had no chance to get anything better. But as you can see here, I'm really impressed with the pictures actually. Okay, as you can see here, not always, but then again, it is able to capture actually really great. And I can definitely tell you one thing, in my opinion, it's definitely the best Sony camera on a phone so far, because it's mostly very reliable, as you can see here, picks up a lot of details. The one thing that I still have to say though, the image processing still takes up quite a lot of time, even though we have on Snapdragon 820. So that's the one thing that I still wish to be faster. But the outcomes are, for the biggest part, very satisfying. And if you check the video, this is maybe one of the biggest highlights, because it doesn't support maybe 4K, but at least it does support 1080p, 60 frames, and especially the exposure transition is done so nice. And one thing that you will see in a few seconds is the actual image stabilization. That is the definite highlight here, because once you will move, the whole movement feels like you would use a gimbal or like a drone, because everything is so extremely smooth now that we will see this in just a few seconds. This already is absolutely nice, so smooth, you don't really see any shaking. There's also not all that much wobbling, but the movement now here, this for me almost looks like a gimbal. Really great done, absolutely top, can't say anything else. This is extremely impressive. I definitely like the camera. Due to overheating, I still have to say though, after about a little less than 15 minutes, it cut off a few features, which is kind of a common thing for Sony cameras. And after about 35 minutes, it told me it would temporarily shut down to cool down, which is, in my opinion though, way more than long enough. But after those 15 minutes where the features get cut off, you get a very choppy viewfinder. The video itself maintains to be still accurate and smooth and all, but yeah, just keep that in mind. But once again here, the transition of exposure has been handled so nice, and that's why I would say this is good enough in terms of camera. So definitely quite good here. So let's get to the pros and cons here, get through these, and then let me tell you my conclusion. Just real quick, so just I don't forget something, I will get to everything if it's impossible to say. Materials feel nice, absolutely. Gorgeous display, the calibration is just so nice. Good speakers, could be better, but that's me complaining always. Top-notch performance, absolutely, besides the few little slowdowns. Very good battery life, stockish software, camera in general, incredible video stabilization, and IP68 certified, so that's a big plus for a lot of the Sony users. They really like to see that. On the negative side, we have the unwieldy, not all that compact for its screen size design, but after you have it for a few days, you get you get used to it, but still, it's just not compact. But it's not a deal breaker or anything like that. Back gets greasy, didn't really bother me. I just wanted to mention it because I don't care, because I actually like glass phones which grease up as well, and the main important thing is it feels great, and that's it. Occasional slowdowns, that's something that they should fix in the future. And then software feels dated by now, which is not a con per se, but just something that I would like to see sometimes getting a little bit polished by now. And still, slow image processing, that takes a while, and the fingerprint reader response fluctuates. As I said, if it's a little bit longer in standby, or sometimes it's a little bit on the slower side, so I've seen that one as well. But I also noticed that the button is easier to press, so maybe you can press it a little bit faster than on some other phones, because on the Xperia X Compact you had to press harder and longer to actually activate the button. Maybe that was the necessary time, therefore it didn't feel so slow like it does here. So that's it. Video is already way too long, so my quick conclusion is it's an overall great phone. Definitely still a little bit on the more pricier side, because usually it was at 700 euros. It's now down to 620. I'm not quite sure about the US price. It should be quite similar, but in terms of dollars, of course, you get an overall really good package. Not really any major flaws or any real cons. That was picking from my side on a very high level, but that's what I do, because the better a phone is, the more I look for possible deal breakers, and that's the only thing. And I didn't really see any, but for me personally, this device just felt a little bit that it didn't quite impress me. I was looking for a standout feature and there was nothing, because yes, the design is great, the display and everything else on a super high flagship level, but there's nothing that would make me say I want this over anything else. And that's maybe one thing, but and I know a lot of Sony viewer or fans will now watch this video and will think, should I upgrade and so on. And I can tell you that so far it's definitely still, after all, even though maybe not the most compact Sony phone, it is as a whole the best one out there. It's not maybe a huge leap from last year over the Z line, over the XX or the X Performance or so, but it's a solid, great flagship. Not cheap, but it will get cheaper. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say. And I know one thing though, I will get a lot of complaints from all the Sony fans. I got that in the past. I'm fine with that, but I would just wish for you to be respectful, reasonable, because we can talk about it. I definitely have no bias against them, but I know I will be called out dumb, stupid for a lot of reasons. And yeah, that's where I will leave it. I still hope you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and have any comments and questions down there. And wish you a nice day. Bye. Until next time.